Hey everybody, welcome back. New week to the Curt Schilling Baseball Show. I'm Curt Schilling. Bill Graff is playing shortstop. Good morning, Bill. Good afternoon.
Hey there, Curt. How are you? How
I'm
was your
phenomenal.
weekend?
It was an amazing week. I am now the proud father of a United States Marine. I got to go to Paris Island and watch my youngest son Garrison graduate, and we took an RV down, and then we drove back. So the 10 hours was story filled. And like I said, I've been blessed. I've had 4 amazing kids, and then my youngest is now in the Corps. So great weekend. And some phenomenal stories. We're going to touch on some injuries this week. A particularly ghastly one, a hot start down in Florida. And then talk about some pitchers that are getting after it. And then we're going to close talking about something that I'm going to assume a lot of people in day-to-day life go through that you don't see a lot in sports, but when you do, it's a headliner. So let's get to the show, Billy.
You bet. Let's start in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, let's start in Pittsburgh, where and I tweeted out after seeing this, the game loses whenever generational talent's not on the field. And this kid, if you haven't seen him yet, there's a 6'7" shortstop in the major leagues named O'Neal Cruz with the Pittsburgh Pirates, who was hurt over the weekend on what might be one of the worst slides I've ever seen. There is a definitively fundamental way to slide at different bases as well as home plate. And if you've seen the highlight, you'll know that he wasn't doing any of them. And he fractured his ankle. Wasn't Joe Theismann horrible, but you could see it. It was bad. And they're saying 10 to 12 weeks. Yeah, I'm going to say a lot longer than that. And I just hope that the fracture wasn't of the level that it will impede this kid's physical ability, because he is a special talent. The amazing thing to me, though, is and it's a result of the new game. And in the new game, I mean bringing kids up from the minor leagues before they have enough at bats, enough games under their belt to have learned all of the fundamentals that you're supposed to learn in the minor leagues, sliding of which is one of them. This could have been career ending, Billy. And like I said, this kid caught me off guard. When I saw him, the first couple highlights I saw him, he was throwing 100 miles an hour from shortstop. But what a gifted talent. This was a horrible thing to watch on video.
Yeah, terrible to watch. And, especially a leg injury with wheels like that. It was hard to watch.
Yeah, well, and especially when you consider you're talking about probably the most intense lateral movement position in baseball, which is shortstop. For a kid that's 6'7" already, and for those of you who don't know, that's by far and away the tallest shortstop in the history of Major League Baseball to play routinely, and he is a monumental talent. On a side note to that, the benches cleared almost immediately afterwards, while he lay there writhing on the ground and the trainer attending him to his broken ankle. Apparently the catcher said something to Sebi Zavala of the White Sox, said something to him. And I don't know what it was, but it clearly somebody in the on-deck circle around the plate saw it, and the bench is emptied. And there was some punches being thrown, but horrible slide, horrible injury, horrible result, bench clearing brawl, and baseball misses one of its supreme talents for probably, I would bet, longer than 3 months. But as the Pirate fans know, one of the few reasons to go out and watch that team in what is one of the coolest stadiums ever built now becomes even less.
Curt, and they were actually off to a 6-3 start. I mean,
yeah,
they're the Pirates, but they
yeah, no, I get it. They are. And it's one of those things. There are certain teams, we're going to talk about one of them, who they get off to a hot start and it's real. There are other teams who play well early in the schedule, and it's not sustainable. And I think Pittsburgh is one of those, unfortunately. because the city deserves better. I was saying Boston, Adam Duvall made a diving catch, hurt his wrist, his left wrist, which is the wrist he had season-ending surgery last year. And we still haven't gotten an update as of tape time. But that's going to, I don't know in the grand scheme of things that's going to matter, because I don't think that Red Sox are going to be a factor in the East. But again, you hate to see that kind of stuff. And
what a start the season he was off to. Batting
Yeah.
455.
Yeah. Off to
4 bombs already.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was those kind of things are and we talked about this during spring training. You can't be one injury away from being out of it. Maybe mid-season after 4 or 5 guys have gone down and you're using the DL, and it becomes something you can mention as a reason. But when it's one player, no matter how hot he is, and that player walks or is off the roster and not playing, if that costs you any chance for the postseason, you weren't really a serious contender anyway. This baseball season is truly a battle of attrition. 162 games. You're going to have guys get hurt. You're going to have guys on the injured list for 10 days and whatnot. But both these injuries, like I said, I think Cruz is going to be far longer than 3 months. I hope he's the same player when he gets back. Duvall, I don't know. But the wrist is clearly, in baseball is doesn't matter if it's your throwing wrist or the other wrist. When talking about hitting and fielding and stuff, it's a huge thing. And hopefully both those guys are back faster than we thought. Team, I hesitated to mention them preseason because in my mind, let me back up. A team with probably as much young talent as any team I talked about in the preseason, if not more. The team that's been at the top of the rankings for organizations and organizational talent and prospects, Tampa. They are 9-0 as of this taping. That's the first team in 19 years to win 9 out of the gate. There's a couple underlying numbers that I always look at when I see things like that. And one of the numbers that is now posted, it was never something in the olden days, was the run differential. Their pitching staff, not their bullpen or their rotation, their pitching staff is pitching to an ERA of 1.89 with a whip of 0.94. And they've given up only 17 earned runs in 9 games, less than 2 runs a game. And they're hitting 289 with 24 bombs, which leads the big leagues, obviously. But run differential, which is something that I've come to really pay attention to as an observer of the game. I think it's a tremendously telling statistic in the NFL and the NHL, goal differential and point differential and stuff like that. They are at 57, plus 57. They've scored 57 more runs than their opponents. Second place in the big leagues, not in the AL or NL. Second place in the big leagues is the Milwaukee Brewers at plus 25. They are plus 32 runs better than that's insane. And I think it's legit. Wander Franco has been touted for years as potentially the top prospect in all of baseball, generational talent again. And they've littered their organization with prospects on the mound and in the field. And doing so because they recognize, I think, as we all have come to see, you've got 6 years with these guys and that's over, because they don't sign players to long-term extensions. They don't have the finances to do that. So they'll end up making the deals where they go out and rob a team like the Pittsburgh Pirates, which they did in the trade that they had made with the Pirates. But it's real. I always had them as kind of third in the East. But this is one of those starts that a long time ago, probably before over half of you were born, the Detroit Tigers in 1985 started out 35-5 in their first 40 games. Season was over at that point. You can't make that ground. And that's the thing. You can't make that ground up. Doesn't matter how good of a season everyone else is having when another team runs away from the pack. Very much like the Boston Bruins in the NHL this year. If you're in the AL East, you can't have a bad week right now until they come back to earth, if they come back to earth. Because when you end up falling, here's the thing to think about. when you're 10 to 12 games behind in the standings, which could easily happen right now with a team that's hot, you've got to be 12 games better than the team you're chasing for the rest of the season. And as the season goes on, you start to look at that, 12, we have to be 12 games better. Well, when there's 24 games left, you need to be 24-0 if they go 12-12, that kind of thing. And then when you stack multiple teams on top of yourself and that first place team, the postseason looks even more impossible. However, and Bill, I think this is one of the things baseball had hoped on. The new playoff schedule changes that. You're no longer having to win your division, more teams in it later in the season, I think really kind of prevents a start like this from eliminating an entire division.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it keeps September that much more interesting and the entire season that much more interesting because there's more teams vying for the ability to get in.
Well, one of the big media points in a season, attention-grabbing points, is that trade deadline, right? And when the trade deadline hits and there's 30-plus teams and 26 of them are buyers, it's fascinating. When 8 of them are buyers, it's a whole lot less fascinating. And I think that they've recognized that. But I do want to jump to another team. And I hesitated to mention them in the preseason, but every time I thought about them, I thought about their manager, who I was a teammate of and who I think is incredibly underrated, and that's the Brewers. They're 7-2 in the Central, and Craig Counsell is, I think, one of the better managers. And knowing him as a person and having chatted with him a little bit as a manager, he is absolutely a quote-unquote player's manager. And they're off to a 7-2 start, despite the fact probably one of the 3 or 4 best pitchers in the game, Corbin Burns, is sporting an ERA of 9.64, which, by the way, I recognize that number because that was my ERA after my first call up in the big leagues. And then in 9 innings, he's only gone 9 innings, 11 hits, walked 5, struggled like crazy, but they're still 7-2. So I don't know. And with the second best run differential in baseball, a much more realistic and down to earth plus 25. That's still in 9 games plus 25 is, again, you're talking about on average 3 runs a game, almost better than your opponent. That's impressive. So be curious to see how that pans out. And Bill, the other thing about this is, and we're going to talk about the trash heap that are Detroit and Oakland right now. The other thing to talk about is the schedule, the change in the schedule. These schedules, Milwaukee won't see the Cardinals 18 times, and the Rays won't see the Yankees and the Red Sox 18 times, and that's gonna have a profound effect on these teams with hot starts and not hot starts.
Absolutely, and a team like Milwaukee not having to play the Cardinals that many times.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're getting the Marlins, and you're getting the Rockies, and you're getting on the days Sandy Alcantara doesn't pitch, that's a great thing.
Right.
But yeah,
and you're getting the Tigers and the A's.
Right, exactly right. You're getting the Tigers, you're getting the A's, you're getting the Royals. So anyway, speaking of the Tigers and A's, they're a combined 4-14 as of this taping, heading into this week. And their combined run differential is -80, -45 in Oakland, -35 in Detroit. Oakland's hitting 192 with the Tigers hitting 205. Oakland ranks 29th, Detroit 28th in slugging. ERA in Oakland staff-wide 7.54. Detroit 6.84. And more importantly, Detroit has had 0 quality starts. And Detroit was a team that kind of surprised me in the sense that I thought that their young talent was going to come to fruition and they were going to get into that division, into the thick of that division. And that's just not happening. And Oakland's just seeing the byproduct of, I think Billy Beane can only pull so much magic out of his hat. He's done it for a long, long time, but that they need to lose their franchise in Oakland. They need to move to Vegas or to Nashville, Same thing with the Marlins. And I don't blame the fans for not going, but those markets aren't going to thrive. They're not going to turn around and suddenly be 3 million in attendance, and without revenue sharing, neither one is sustainable in either market. So near and dear to my heart, obviously, is pitching. And there's a couple guys who have started off hot. Hot is kind of an understatement. And it's always hard for me to get horribly excited or overly excited, when you're talking about 11 innings, but that's what we do now with starting pitching. Dylan Cease, 2-0, 11 in the third innings, punched out 18, giving up 3 hits. He a little wild in his last start, but that's the kind of guy that throws a no-hitter, that effectively wild guy. I'm not putting myself in their category, but if you look back, Greg Maddux, probably the best command of any pitcher ever. Roger Clemens, and Tom Glavine, 400. You're talking about almost 1,500 to 2,000 starts. No-hitters. Guys that are in the strike zone generally don't throw no-hitters because they throw too many strikes.
And guys like Dylan Cease, the bat doesn't touch the ball nearly often enough.
Well, and I'll ask you quickly, trivia: the who's thrown the most no-hitters in the history of Major League Baseball?
Ooh,
With
I
7.
don't know.
Nolan Ryan.
Nolan threw 7, 0 for the Mets.
Right, and effectively, wild would define Nolan Ryan. That's when you have a guy that's effectively wild with that much power, it just doesn't work for hitters. They're not comfortable, and every now and then when it clicks in, I think one of the exceptions, obviously, I think Verlander has 2 or 3, and we're actually going to talk about him in a minute. And he's a strike thrower. Scherzer, same thing. Garrett Cole, who punched out, it felt like every hitter he saw opening day, is 2-0, 12 innings, 19 punch outs, 6 hits given up, 0.73 ERA. All the peripherals for these two guys, for Cease and for Cole, are, if you're a fantasy owner that drafted them, maybe you thought it was a little early. You didn't. These guys are going to be horses. And I'm looking at magical seasons. And we talked about this, Bill, earlier, with trying to figure out what was actually going on with Justin Verlander and the injury. It was a commentary around his Terry's major, lat, this and that. We weren't really sure what it was, but the fact of the matter is, I think it's going to be a while. He's talking now, he being Justin, because the team isn't. He's talking now about being back sometime in April. But the problem is, it's hard to define this. I don't know what, apparently the quote is, he's upped his throwing regimen to 75%. I'm not really sure what that means. If it's 75% effort, and he's ready to take the leash off. He will be back pitching. He says he's going to be back before the end of April. I would say absolutely no chance. You're talking about at least 1, if not 2, I would think, rehab starts, because the disconnect from spring training to the season being extended by an injury is different than coming out any other time. And the Mets fans are Mets fans. That they're not 7 or 8 and 9-0 and dominating is making them panic. And having a Verlander back is far better than not. But I would tell you, the longer you wait, the better you should feel for the year. Although, again, Bill, I always worry about stuff like that. When there's a trap injury or a Terry's minor or Terry's major injury, that generally is a result of another structural situation that isn't good. And not having that defined scares me a little bit when it comes to a Verlander. So I'm saying no ways.
And a 41-year-old.
Right. But I'm saying no chance for the end of April, but hopefully I'm wrong. And the guy, we talked about him early in the show when we first started, as we moved into camp, a guy we kept our eye on, a guy who made the team. He was like I think batty for the Mets, a guy who had a chance to make the team, but people were thinking, he'll probably start in the minor leagues. But Jordan Walker with the Cardinals has a 2023 hitting streak. He's hitting every game. He's hitting 350, 3 homers, 8 RBIs, and I don't even like to make reference to this next piece of data, but thank you for including it, Bill. He is the only player in the majors born in 2002. Yeah, 2002.
Think about that.
No, I can't. I was 36, and that's makes me sick to my stomach. You know what? We're gonna kind of close. This is towards the end of the show, talking about something that we might get into depending on how fans feel about it. Austin Meadow, who is I think a potential superstar, big high pick, came over to the Tigers in a deal. He went on the IL with what they defined as anxiety, and joins Daniel Bard, who is on the IL with the same issue. And the Daniel Bard stuff I saw coming, my heart dropped when I saw the outing and he hit the batter, threw the wild pitches. There was that pit of my stomach feeling that maybe he had fallen back into that trap. And anxiety, I think, is a very lighthearted term. It's almost like spraying. People don't understand, I think, how serious it can be. I got to tell you, I actually, Bill, I went through something at the end of my career, and I kept it under wraps for the entire last year of my career on the mound. But I developed the yips in a sense. I could not come set in the stretch and throw over to first base if I didn't do it immediately. So when I would come set, I would have to throw over immediately, or I couldn't throw over. I would balk. And I couldn't stop it. I did it. I went to practice and practiced it. And when I got in a game, couldn't stop it. And so, and thankfully, what I ended up doing was I alternated between throwing over immediately and holding the ball till somebody called timeout, to vary the run game. I was always quick to home plate, but I couldn't throw over if I held on to the ball. So I couldn't hold the ball for 3 or 5 and then go over. I had to go immediately. And it was the weirdest thing that I couldn't fix it. And it was kind of scary for me, because I can remember thinking about it in a game. I had to think about it before it happened. I had to think like, okay, I'm going to throw over this time. And I almost had to say it out loud to do it. And it was very weird and totally out of my control, which was even scarier, especially when you're talking about athletes. And for those of you that are much younger than me, there's a gentleman who I grew up a Pirate fan in the 70s, a gentleman named Steve Blass, pitched for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he was the first person to develop, and they called it Steve Blass disease. Steve Sachs at second base, Chuck Knobloch,
second base.
Second base. Rick Ankiel was the big modern day issue player as a top pitcher, probably a potential Sandy Koufax-like career, derailed and eliminated when they put him on the mound in game 1 of the playoffs, and it ended his career on the mound. Unbelievably, he came back and played every day in the big leagues as an outfielder, which is absurd. But it's real. I can remember watching Steve Sachs couldn't throw the ball from second base to first base. And when I say couldn't throw the ball, I mean, he just spiked it. And I watched Chuck Knobloch do that in 04 with the Yankees, or 01 with the Yankees. And it pretty much ended his career. Horrifying stuff. And I've worked with sports psychologists, so we may end up actually getting one of my former guys on here to talk about it, because it's a real thing. And I would absolutely imagine it is a thing in real life as well. And
I'll tell you, the encouraging thing to me about this, Curt, is that baseball teams are allowing these guys to go on the DL.
Yeah.
In your generation of players.
See ya.
Yeah, you weren't going on the DL with anxiety, but fortunately in 2023.
You weren't even admitting it. You wouldn't admit it, because back then it was all men were men, and you didn't admit it. And it's hit far more athletes far more often than anybody. I played with a guy, Jim Eisenreich, who was one of the most talented athletic human beings I ever played with, Jim had Tourette's, and he also had performance anxiety. He was a huge prospect with the Twins, and couldn't do it. Walked away from the game, came back, and thankfully was on the 93 team, and it was a teammate and one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. But I've known it's hard for me to fathom that, given that your entire life, when you get to, for the most part, every player in the big league spent their entire life in front of the microscope at some, if not all, levels. Chipper Jones was, from the day he was 12 years old till he got to the big leagues, was touted, covered, watched probably as much as anybody. So it's hard for me to understand that. But it does exist. I absolutely, unequivocally, without a doubt, believe it. Closing note.
I want to end the show.
Yep.
On this final note, because
I wanted to,
you made this point, and you were absolutely correct.
I wanted to, because you're going to see more of this, by the way. So in a move of sorts, the Minnesota Twins have decided that they're going to serve beer at the ballpark until the end of the 8th inning instead of traditionally ending the end of the 7th. We predicted that it's going to happen. On a side note, Bill, I don't see any upside to this, because you're allowing people to drink closer to the end of the game, which means potentially you're allowing people who have drank the ability to get behind the wheel sooner. And I don't like that at all.
I'm with you.
There was always a reason, I thought, why, hey, let's cut it off, because generally in the old days, you had an hour between the 7th and the end of the game. And, hopefully millions of lives were saved because people that might have been a little tipsy sobered up a little bit in that hour. That's not going to be, I don't see this as a good thing. I really don't. And, it's not really going back to the pitch clock and all this other stuff. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to see a lot more clubs doing this. I think the other thing you're going to see, Bill, I think you're going to see teams opening the gates sooner. Generally what happens when home teams will open the gates for home team batting practice, or for visitors batting practice for the most part, or to some degree batting practice. I think you're going to see teams open the gates sooner, allowing fans in sooner, which is going to allow them to start drinking sooner, which means you'll start seeing fights sooner, earlier in the game, and inebriated fans getting tossed out earlier in the game, which is, again, not a great thing. But this is what happens because baseball wants its money. And if you're cutting into that, which there's no doubt in my mind, it's just mathematically impossible that this isn't impacting the bottom line. It's impossible. It has to be. You're selling $18 beers for almost an hour and a half less a night, or an hour less. And that is not a good thing for major league owners. So listen, again, hey, congratulations to my youngest son, Garrison, on becoming I said, Bill, I think it's pretty cool. If you think about life, you graduate from college, you graduate from things, you graduate into the Marines, which I think is very, very cool. So to all of the Delta Company, First Recruit Training Battalion at Paris Island who graduate on Friday, God bless you all. Semper Fidelis, and I hope you guys are having a nice 10 days off, because you're back at it again in about a week, boys, and girls. Billy,
well, congratulations, Curt, and
thank you,
and may they all stay safe.
Absolutely.
In protecting our fine nation.
Yes. So hey, I'll see you again Friday, Bill.
Absolutely. In the meantime, I'll be at OutKick.
Hey, will the Rays be 14-0 when we see each other again?
If they are, that moves to the first story in the show.
Yes, it does. It does. So I'll see you again Friday. And I forgot I had another really witty thing to say, which clearly wasn't witty enough for me to remember.
We'll save it for Thursday.
Yes, OutKick.com, folks. Check us out at OutKick.com. Quick episodes, 20, 30 minutes, some pretty cool interviews already with Dave Hollins and Lenny Dykstra, former teammates of mine, and we'll have more in the future. But we stay baseball all the time. Have a great week. And by the way, kudos to Tampa Bay for bringing back the Devil Ray uniforms in a throwback day. Well done.